Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Miami, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, the story of radio broadcasting in Pakistan on the air in Peshawar, and our Australian DX report from Bob Padula. Wavescan presents Focus on Asia, a year-long series of reports about shortwave broadcasting and listening on the continent of Asia. The city of Peshawar in Pakistan is located right up against the edge of the Khyber Pass in what used to be the northwest frontier in British India. The name Peshawar comes from an old Sanskrit word which is translated as City of Men, perhaps meaning a city with a lot of people, or a city where the men were dominant and powerful. Ray Robinson of KVOH picks up the story.
Thanks, Jeff. The original inhabitants were tribal people of Indo-Iranian heritage who moved into the area in ancient times. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great moved his armies through the area in their onward march towards mainland India, and it's stated that Doubting Thomas of biblical fame passed through the area in his trek towards South India in 52 AD. By 100 AD, historians tell us that Peshawar was the seventh most populous city in the world, and it was around that era that descendants of soldiers from Alexander's army became rulers in Peshawar itself. The Buddhist era began soon afterwards with missionaries coming from the plains of India. The Buddhists constructed a stupa, a rounded mound that was 400 feet high, and it is thought that this was the tallest building on earth at the time. On several occasions the stupa was damaged and destroyed by lightning, and although it was repaired and rebuilt several times, only the ruins of the base remain today. Islam came to Peshawar 1,000 years ago. The territory was absorbed into British India in 1849, and the monumental Babi Khyber, the Khyber Gateway, was constructed over the highway in 1964. During the 1980s, with the Russian presence in Afghanistan, around 4 million refugees came into Peshawar, though the official population for Peshawar stands around 2.5 million. Wireless came to Peshawar in 1919 with the establishment of station VWP, quite close to the Bala Hisar Fort and the nearby railway line. An early postcard shows all three in one photograph: the fort, the railway line, and the wireless station. When wireless became radio and spark gap gave way to voice communication, the station identification was changed from VWP to VVP. A station list in 1933 showed station VVP on 34.28 meters, or as we would say today, 8750 kilohertz. It was in 1934 that the Marconi Radio Company in England offered equipment for a new radio broadcasting station to the government of the Northwest Frontier Province. The agreement provided that if the project was successful, the provincial government would purchase the equipment. This new broadcasting station was inaugurated with local programming on March 6, 1935, and soon afterwards it was allocated the call sign VUP, with these letters indicating India, Peshawar. This small radio station emitted just 250 watts on 1500 kilohertz, which gave it little more than just quite local coverage. There was a promise that the station would be upgraded to 2 kilowatts, though this prediction was never fulfilled. During the following year, the provincial government did take over control of the station, and during the next year again the station was taken over by the Indian national government in Delhi. Then, in March 1939, station VUP Peshawar was converted into a relay station, taking its programming on a telephone line from the national station VUD in Delhi. However, a totally new broadcasting station with new studios and new technical equipment was constructed at the old wireless location in Peshawar soon afterwards, and this was inaugurated on December 1st, 1942. This new station, with its new RCA transmitter, was assigned the medium wave channel 629 kHz with a power of 10 kilowatts. And thus there were really two different radio broadcasting stations in Peshawar in the era before partition. The Marconi station on 1500 kHz, followed by the government station on 629 kHz, which were on the air concurrently under the same call sign VUP. About 1.5 years before the epic events of Freedom at Midnight, there was a man from Pilibhit, up near the border with Nepal, by the name of Tahir Hussain. He owned a radio shop in Delhi, and he agreed to assemble a radio transmitter together with a power supply. This radio broadcasting equipment was smuggled in 3 large fruit baskets into a house in Peshawar occupied by Sardar Abdur Rab. On April 24, 1946, this new clandestine radio broadcasting station was activated in the 70-meter band on 4285 kHz from another home in Peshawar. The programming that was broadcast over this mini radio station was intended to influence the vote in a coming local political election. The station was moved several times within Peshawar itself in order to avoid detection, and its short lifespan ended as soon as the elections were over. At the time of partition in 1947, there were just 2 radio broadcasting stations on the air in West Pakistan, VUL Lahore with 5 kilowatts on 1086 kHz, and VUP Peshawar with 10 kilowatts on both 629 and 1500 kHz. When things got sorted out in the 2 dominions, India and Pakistan, the call signs were regularized in Pakistan under new designations for the new country, and VUP Peshawar became APP. As Nihal Ahmed tells us in his very interesting book, A History of Radio Pakistan, the transition from All India Radio Peshawar to Radio Pakistan Peshawar took place around midnight between Thursday, August 14th and Friday, August 15th, 1947. At the time, the AIR relay station VUP in Peshawar was on the air with 10 kilowatts on 1500 kHz. Soon after 11 p.m. on Thursday, August the 14th, Yunus Sethi made the final announcement on behalf of All India Radio. This was followed soon after midnight with the opening announcement on behalf of the Pakistan Broadcasting Service in the Urdu language by Aftab Ahmed Bismil, and then a similar announcement in the Pashto language, the language of Afghanistan, by Abdullah Jan Maghmoom. Interestingly, the first series of new radio stations planned for installation in the new Pakistan were all intended to radiate on shortwave rather than medium wave. A few months after partition, a representative of the new Pakistani government visited England to negotiate the purchase of equipment for several new radio stations. Soon afterwards, it was announced that these new radio stations would be installed in 5 cities in Pakistan, including Peshawar, and that the transmitters at these locations would operate on shortwave with 7.5 kilowatts. However, as the unfolding of events would demonstrate, not one of these transmitters was installed anywhere in the territory we know as Pakistan. Much later, in 1960, a new shortwave station was installed in the Pakistani frontier city Peshawar, and it was inaugurated on October 15th. This was a 10 kilowatt AWA transmitter from Australia, and it was given the call sign APP2. As time went by, another new transmitting station was constructed at Chugalpura, some 3 miles northeast of Peshawar. This station originally housed 2 transmitters, medium wave and short wave, at 10 kilowatts each, though these days just one medium wave transmitter is on the air at this location, now with 100 kilowatts on 729 kHz. Radio Pakistan Peshawar APP shortwave left the air in 1999. Most recently, a newer and larger transmitting station was constructed at Parbi, a dozen miles east from Peshawar, and it houses two medium-wave transmitters with 100 kilowatts on 1170 kHz and 300 kilowatts on 540 kHz. Back in the late 1930s, before partition, QSL cards were printed for general use by the various stations in the Federation-wide network of All India Radio. These cards also showed entries for VUP Peshawar. The first known QSLs from the new Radio Pakistan are dated in the year 1949, just 2 years after partition. These cards showed the Radio Pakistan logo, the star and the crested moon, and they listed the early radio stations that were on the air at the time. A subsequent QSL card gave more details about the early medium-wave stations in Pakistan. The earliest of these cards, of which there are 3 or 4 different designs, lists the medium-wave and shortwave stations in Peshawar, APP1 on 580 kHz and APP2 shortwave.
Thanks very much, Ray Robinson of KVOH in Los Angeles.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Thank you, Alan Graham. Now some DX news from the Danish Shortwave Club International from their DX Window publication sent to us by Anker Petersen in Denmark. Starting with Australia, you may have heard that there have in the past few weeks been some very serious budget cuts at Radio Australia. Well, John Figliazzi in DXplorer passes on the details of some of these cuts. He says, here's what I've been able to assemble from various sources that I consider reliable about what can only be described as a truly catastrophic situation for Radio Australia. Keep in mind that Radio Australia management is left with few options, none of them good, in its efforts to preserve and maintain anything resembling a viable service for its regional and international audiences. The English language programming department is effectively gutted. The only remaining Radio Australia productions in English appear to be some hourly news bulletins and the Pacific Beat program. All else, including the excellent Asia-Pacific program, ceases. At least for the time being, Radio Australia intends to maintain a 24/7 English language service by pulling all of its content from ABC Radio domestic services, except for the morsels described above. A revised English language schedule is in preparation and will be announced and implemented shortly. Language services in Tok Pisin, Vietnamese, Khmer, Chinese, French, and Burmese appear to remain, but only in some skeletal form, since about 3/4 to 4/5 of those staffs are to be fired. Again, it appears the plan is to pull some content from domestic sources. The situation is so dire and so immediate that there will be a culling of half of the journalists on staff via a random process. No reduction in shortwave schedules has yet been indicated, but it's hard to see how that continues unaffected and unabated beyond anything but the very short term. That news from John Figliazzi about Radio Australia. Now, over in New Zealand, Radio New Zealand International has posted a new schedule showing reductions in the DRM broadcasts. They note that in future, our DRM is on air only at times required for rebroadcast by Pacific stations. That item from Dan Ferguson in DXplorer. David Rickwish from New Zealand points out, we were saddened to learn on July 21st that the Radio New Zealand International Mailbox program, to which we regularly contribute features about Pacific Radio, has been canceled after 65 years. We might note that some of those features have been rebroadcast here on Wavescan. And Rich D'Angelo has heard Radio New Zealand International on 15720 kHz from 0357 to 0416 UTC, July 7th, with the vocal selection followed by time pips at 0400, an ID, and news in English. The end of the news at 0405 was followed by an ID and promo announcements into a weather report. Fair to good reception, says Rich D'Angelo in the northeastern U.S. SW Radio Africa, broadcasting from Meyerton, South Africa on 4880 kHz, was heard at 1746 UTC, signing off at 1800 on July 18th. This was in English, and it was the last broadcast of SW Radio Africa, says Ivo Ivanov. Now, their website, via Dan Ferguson, Alkesh Gupta, and Ivo Ivanov, had the following announcement. It is with regret that SW Radio Africa announces that after 13 years, our shortwave broadcasts are to end on Friday, July 18th. You have welcomed us into your homes since our first shortwave broadcast on December 19th, 2001. Our broadcasts will continue on our website via Channel Zim through TV decoders and by various other forms of new media. We know how much these shortwave broadcasts have meant to our listeners in more remote areas who have so little access to news and information, and we sincerely regret that we will no longer be able to provide this service. And that was SW Radio Africa, a semi-clandestine service beamed to Zimbabwe from South Africa. Thanks to DX Window and the Danish Shortwave Club International, Anker Peterson, for those items. Now let's go to Bob Padula in Australia with his monthly DX report.
Greetings to shortwave enthusiasts around the world. This is Bob Padula in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, with another edition of the Australian DX Report. These magazines provide news of shortwave broadcasting stations, monitoring summaries, propagation news, and other information concerning world international broadcasting. As I start to remind you that full detailed QSLs are available for correct reports received for these episodes. The address will be given at the end of the program. And to note that all times, days and dates given in our episodes are in UTC, and we use the 24-hour time system. The episodes are compiled from resources made available by the Electronic DXpress Radio Monitoring Association, which is based here in Melbourne. We have lots of information in our program this time, as usual, and that includes our solar activity report, propagation and monitoring, shortwave station news, and information concerning new schedules of international broadcasting services. So first up, we have our solar activity report with the courtesy of the Ionospheric Prediction Service in Sydney, New South Wales here in Australia. The IPS reports that solar activity is now running at a moderate level. It's been down as low as low or even very low in recent weeks, but has now moved upwards. The report indicates that the 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux has increased to 198. That's 198. That's a very high level. And the daily equivalent smooth sunspot number has increased to 150. That's 150. And that's also a very high number. And the IPS says that those figures are not expected to change significantly in the immediate future. So that means that we'll be experiencing worldwide reception on darkness or semi-darkness paths on frequencies above about 14 megahertz with more reliability than in the past. So frequencies above 14 megahertz on darkness paths, and as I mentioned, will become more reliable as we move into the current season. Current season, of course, is the A 2014 season. This is the current season that we're now in. International broadcasting schedules all operate within these parameters, and the current sunspot cycle is sunspot cycle number 24. And this is expected to peak sometime towards the end of this current year. So we're currently at the plateau of sunspot cycle 24, and while we're during plateaus of sunspot cycles, shortwave propagation can tend to be somewhat unreliable and unpredictable on long-distance paths. Now, some information concerning monitoring. Pelican Lake is in Melbourne's outer east, here in Victoria. The lake is actually part of what is known as the Chirnside Park Country Club, 35 kilometres east of the central business district next to the Yarra River. I was there recently in the afternoon. Some good signals were tracked in the 49, 31 and 25 metre bands across the time span 0500 to 0530. And this is a summary of what I heard recently, using small Eaton E5 receiver with a 5 metre random antenna. 6005, the BBC from Ascension in English, and these are all 0500 to 0530. 6060, Radio Havana, Cuba in English. 6080, the Voice of America from Sao Tome in English. 6125, the Spanish Foreign Radio in Spanish, and that's as early as 0350. 6180, Radio Nacional, Brazil, early fade in as early as 0355. 9565, another Brazilian station, 0500 to 0530. And 9645, yet another Brazilian, same time period. And 9818, the station in Brazil heard at 0500. The nominal frequency is 9820, but it's drifting down to 9818 or 9819. And Radio Nacional Brazil 11780, and 11780, the same frequency for the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran in English, from 0400 to signing off at 0420. And another Brazilian station on 11815. And finally 11905, China National Radio Network 5. It's the internal service, domestic broadcast in the Amoy language. Now, some more information concerning propagation, this time from another location in Melbourne's outer east. This is from the Warrandyte State Park at a place called Fiddler Gully Pigtail Track. This location is in the Heritage Gold Mining Precinct. Sadly, no nuggets now, only tailings, old shafts and quartz outcrops. And between 0500 and 0530, one afternoon recently, I looked at the 13, 16 and 22 metre bands, again using the Eaton E5 receiver and a 5 metre random wire. And this is what we heard. 13600, Radio Oman in Arabic. 13610, China National Radio Network 1 in Chinese. 13630, Radio Australia Shepparton in English. That's ground wave propagation into Melbourne. 13650, the Voice of Korea in English. 13695, Radio France International from Issoudun, the transmitting site in France, in French. Iran, 2 frequencies for the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran, 13710 in Turkish and 13740 in Dari. And the Vatican Radio from the Madagascar relay station at Salata on 13765, that's the Madagascar relay in English. 13790, Radio Free Asia from Tinian in the Marianas Islands in Chinese. And 13850, Radio Cairo in Egypt with Arabic. And 13860, right over the top end of the 22 metre band, Radio Fardar, the IBB station in Germany, broadcasting from the transmitter site at Lampertheim in Persian. And in the 16 metre band, quite a host of frequencies, including many from China Radio International. I won't repeat all of these here, but some of the other stations in this band at 0500 or 0530 included the voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran on 17655 in Russian to signing off at 0520, and on 17660 in Bosnian signing on at 0520. 17670 Radio Azadi in Dari from Kuwait, and another frequency for Radio Azadi from Germany on 17690, the relay station there. And 17780 Radio Romania International in French, signing off at 0530 after programs to Africa. And that's all we have time for in our episode of the Australian DX Report, which came to you from Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. I'd just like to remind you that we offer full detail QSL cards showing Australian scenes and wildlife for correct reports received for these broadcasts. We also offer an email QSL service for reports sent via the internet or email. Full details about the QSL service are available at the Electronic DXpress homepage, which is simply edxp.org. So until our next program, this is Bob Padula in Melbourne in Victoria, Australia, wishing you all good listening. Thanks for being with us and good DX. See you soon.
¡Vámonos pues, Nica! ¡Vámonos!
The singer Grace Lucia Kelly ends our program today. She's a Nicaraguan who lives in Miami, or at least she did when she recorded this song, Amor Nica. And thank you for listening to Wavescan, the International DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson. Next week, medium wave broadcasting stations on high power, and our Japan DX report. Several QSL cards are available for reception reports on this program. You can send your AWR and KSDA reception reports for Wavescan to the AWR address in Indianapolis that we'll give you in a moment, and also to the station your radio is tuned to, WRMI or WWCR or KVOH, or to the AWR relay stations that carry Wavescan. The main Wavescan address is Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Miami, and we leave you with this music from Nicaragua. Till next week, good listening, everyone.
Los insontes y zanates, y nos amamos al ritmo de marimba y atabales. Amame con la bravura de